Hey there, Wargamers, Justin the Art Painter, and today we're going to talk about brush care. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in, and big shout out to Robert from Fortress Miniatures and Games for sponsoring the channel. He's been trying to help me get some content going, specifically the hobby stuff, so that I can share some painting things with you guys. Now, we previously got a video up that's breaking down our tools as well as airbrushes, airbrush care, things of that nature, but nothing on the painting side yet, and today is going to be no different. Today, we're going to be covering paintbrush care, maintenance, things of that nature. For some of you, this may be a review. For some of you, it may be new. If you skip it, I understand, but if you want to listen to me ramble for a little bit today, maybe learn something, that's what we're going to cover. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, guys, so if you tuned into my previous video where I broke down tools, this is not going to be all that new to you. You've seen these brushes before. We've got the cheaper ones here, more expensive ones here. For today, we're going to be using the 8404 Raphael size 2. It's going to be our example brush today for what we're going to be doing. No paint work, just going to go over some anatomy of this and then the cleaning. The cleaning is the big deal. So let's go ahead and check out our brush. Now, obviously, this is a paintbrush, this is the painty end, this is the handle. That's the basics. You probably know that if you're watching this because it's a paintbrush. The thing I like about this one is it tapers, so the back gets thin. You get this nice thickness here, which just makes it a little bit more comfortable. But in terms of the brush itself, we've got the ferrule here. We've got the bristles here, and then the tip. That's where the painty part goes. But then we've also got the body. I believe that's what they call it. Either the body or the bell, something like that. So you'll notice, let me actually grab one more brush too. You'll notice this one is kind of wide. I've also got a very thin one here. So this is very extreme. The text is faded off this one. I can't remember if it's a size 000 or 00, but it's very, very small. So by comparison, you can see they both have a tip. They both have kind of a taper, and they get wide right in here, which is very comfortable. That said, the body of the brush on this one is very thin versus that one, which is very thick. So this is going to have a bunch of your paint and like capillary action. When you go to paint, the paint can wick down to the tip and then come out onto your surface. With this one, the load that it can hold is much smaller, so it uses for dotting eyes or very, very faint scratch marks or edge highlights, things like that. But I don't get a lot of use out of this per paint application or per time I have to dip this into the paint, because the body doesn't hold that much. So I am starting to favor these larger brushes, which take a little bit of time getting used to. But once you get used to them, and with the accuracy of trying to paint with the tip of it, you can get a lot of work done. So with this one, as being one of my more expensive brushes, I'm more particular with trying to maintain it and keep it in good working order. So first things first, when you're painting, it's a good rule of thumb. I think it probably to aim to 50 or 60% of your body being filled with paint. Somewhere around my fingernail is, somewhere in there. You never want to get paint into the ferrule, that is the metal part. The bristles go down into this, and that's what helps encapsulate them and form your tip. It goes right down in here, and somewhere it's going to be glued, and that creates the pinch of it. If you get paint into the ferrule and it dries, you'll start to have bristles falling out, and that is going to be the first signs of your brush dying. It will kill your brush. So try as best you can to prevent paint from getting in there, especially from drying. If you get paint in it, it's not the end of the world. Don't panic. These are disposable. If you use proper maintenance, which we'll go over today, you can prolong the life of them. I've got some Winsor Newton Series 7s that I've had for over a decade now, I think, or at least a decade, and they're still cooking. They look pretty raggedy, but they do have some function left in them, more than some of my brushes. But if you practice good maintenance and prevent paint from getting the ferrule and especially drying, you're good. If something gets in there quickly, rinse your brush out, clean it quickly, swish it, and just make sure no paint dries in it. It's not the end of the world. It's going to happen. You're going to mix something, you're going to realize, oh crap, my paintbrush got paint up to here. Just clean it off. You're fine. Don't freak out. So in terms of brush care, we got some water here, and we've got some of our brush soaps. Now, as I mentioned in my tools video, this one is my transport back and forth to work puck, and this is my one at home. It's bigger. I don't favor one really more so than the other. I will try and talk about some differences, but I like them both just fine. You're going to hear conflicting opinions about these online. Some people swear by this, some people swear by this. I like them both equally. They are fine. There are some people that take a dump on this, and in my humble opinion, I think it's unwarranted and they don't know what they're talking about, in my opinion. I've been using this for at least a decade, and I've never had it ruin a brush. Some people will say otherwise. I personally never had it happen. I have a brush I spent $25 on, at least 25, and I use this, and I've never had it have issues. Your mileage may vary, but when you're getting opinions, be aware that everyone has one. Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad, and some are going to be just poo-poo. In this case, both of these are fine. You'd be good with either one. Let's start with at face value. They do make a larger puck of this. This is a small one, so again, I take it back and forth to work. Much like my airbrushes, I've got my little go bag for them. I've got my zipper brush bag here to transport. Go back and forth to work. Having the small stuff is easier to transport. So I like this for that. I don't like transporting this one just because it's big, and with my bag that I carry stuff in, I can chuck this in there. It fits right down one of the little cubbies. We're good. Value-wise, though, this is pretty expensive. I do like it. I like the company. Monument Hobbies is great people. Jen and Jason are freaking fantastic, but this is a little bit more expensive. I have the larger puck as well. But if you're on a hobby budget or don't have access to Monument Hobbies, if you're overseas in particular, it's a little bit harder to find, you can probably find Masters Brush Soap. The big deal with the Masters Brush Soap or brush cleaner used to be that you could get it at Hobby Lobby and you could use their 40% off coupon, which they've discontinued the use of generally. Maybe you'll find coupons otherwise, but they don't do it as prominently as they used to. So the value on it's not there like it used to be. But you can also get this on Amazon. And if you get it on Amazon, I recommend just getting the large one unless you're going back and forth transporting. Like it's good to go. So either one of these is fine. Pick what is going to work good for you on your budget. If you want to support a small company, can't go wrong with the brush soap from Monument Hobbies because they're good people. If you're on a budget, this stuff you might get a little cheaper. I like to buy this when I restock frequently because I like Jen and Jason from Monument Hobbies, and while it may be more and I like the products equally, I also like to vote with my dollars. I love their paints. I love them. They're really cool, so I also buy this frequently. So for cleaning, you're going to notice I'll show you this brush has been cleaned, and I'm going to show you one of the telltale signs of the brush being cleaned and done properly. We're going to push down on the back of my hand here, and you'll notice those bristles really aren't moving or bending. And I'm being light, I'm not trying to like break this thing, but that's because brush soap was dried in here, which when I get to the cleaning process, that is what it's going to be when it dries. So we'll clean this one. I'll use both soaps, so we get to see me do this twice. But I'll clean it and you'll see what I'm talking about. So normally I would do this in a bathroom with running water because I find that the swishing action or the running action helps clean. But in this case, it is already a clean brush. I'm just going to go through the motion so you see it. So I'm using a cup of water here. So we're going to use the water. And this is what you would do if this had dry soap in it, which it will. You're going to get it wet first, rehydrate, and now you notice the bristles move. Right? It pulled the soap right out. You always want to do that first. Once you've cleaned your brush, or once you have a clean brush you want to paint with, rinse out the paint first. So get our brush wet. And in this case, we're going to get a little bit of water down into our puck of soap, right? And we're going to hydrate that up. Now I'm going with the grain. I'm going this way. I'm not jabbing. Left and right's fine. You don't want to jab. You want to pull. So I'm pulling. I'll go left and right, and as I pull, I'll rotate. You'll see my fingers, they'll do like this. So I'm rotating the bristles through it, get a little bit more water, and we're just going back and forth. Now, once I've had a good paint session and I've had a bunch of brushes to clean, there's plenty of suds in here already. So now it's got some suds in it. If you're concerned and you really want to clean this out, you can drag it across your hand. I like to use the curves of my thumb or my fingers. It's a good spot to get some texture to help clean without damaging anything. And again, we're going with the grain of our brush, and I'm rotating as I go. I'm pulling and rotating. You never want to jab, and you don't want to yank on it. We will be kind of pulling, but not necessarily pulling. It's more going with the grain in just a moment. So back and forth, and just doing like that. And now I will swish, because if there was paint in there, I want to make sure I got it out. And you'll do this, and you'll notice probably the first time, if you've never done this, the first time you do that, you probably see a bunch of paint come out or color come out in your water. And that's because there was paint that was stuck in the ferrule or your bristles. So we'll do that. And when I do like this, I'm lightly touching, not necessarily like pinching, but lightly applying force just to form a tip as a habit. Come in here, a little bit more water. And we're getting back into the suds, right? And now, because this is clean, I've rinsed it, I'm reasonably comfortable that this is going to be good to go now. I don't really have any paint stuck in there, making sure there's plenty of suds. Now, with a sudded up paintbrush. I'm going to lightly follow the grain. And what we're trying to do here is remove the suds, but we're gonna leave some in there. We're taking off the bulk, but we're also, more importantly, forming the tip. We want this to dry with a tip. All right. Okay, and you'll notice my hand keeps going off. I'm wiping it off on the towel because I find forming the tip is a little bit easier when your hands are a little drier, so I'll pull off some of that soap. So do this until we are happy with the tip. And I'm pretty OCD, so as I'm doing this, I'm pulling, light pressure pull, going with the grain, and I'm rotating with this hand. So we're just kind of going, looking at the tip, making sure this is relatively straight. I think we're good to go. And then there we go. So shouldn't have any frayed hairs, should be relatively straight, should be coming to a tip. What we've done is we've got the bulk of the soap off, but we've left soap in it because that was on there. We were rubbing it into the bristles. We're going to let this dry. It's going to dry with the brush soap in it, and it's going to kind of harden, but it's going to hold the bristles into shape. So next time you go, it's got the shape. You'll notice sometimes if you leave a brush sitting for a long time with the bristles all frayed out, it can be difficult to get the tip formed again. This is why we do this. This cleans your bristles, it rehydrates, it conditions, whatever, and then it hardens. And then when you're ready, you just swish it out in the water, form your tip again without the soap, and then you start painting. So always form your tip, whether it's with soap or just water in between paints. Always store this, even if you're setting it down for a little bit, always form your tip and then set it down, whether it's soap or not. So one of the things you'll see some people do online is they will store this tip down if they have a holder. I don't have a holder and I don't do that. The reason I don't do it, other than not having a holder, is I would be afraid someone would bump my mounting apparatus, and if they falls tip down, if I'm not there to fix it, now my bristles are bent, they could dry that way, or they could get bent, messed up, whatever. So I don't personally like that. This isn't so wet that storing it somewhere else is going to let so much moisture in here. For me personally, I've not had that damage it. If you leave this sopping wet and you store it like this and the water goes down, there is an idea or notion that you'll degrade the glue in here and your bristles will come out. I can't attest to that being 100% fact, but I don't imagine that it's too far off base. So if you do have a way to store it this way, sure. I store mine just laying down. Also, if you've got a cap. I don't have all the caps for mine. They've been lost or whatever. I also struggle sometimes putting them back on without hitting the bristles. That's difficult for me. But if you do have a cap, you can form the tip, put your cap back on, store this in the way that seems best for you, and with the cap on, your bristles are relatively protected. And then when you come back for your next session, this should be hardened or reasonably stiff, not super hard, stiff. So if you touch your hand, it's probably not going to bend. Swish it in water, clean it out real good, and then you're good to go. On the topic of cleaning out brushes before you use them, it's also something to remember when you get a new brush. If it's a quality one, usually there's some kind of starch in it. During shipment, they've got starch on these brushes to keep the bristles to a point. Usually, if you order off Amazon, sometimes you get duds, but usually they'll have starch in them. You got to clean them generally before you use them, or you might not get a good paint experience. So that is using the Masters brush soap. I'm going to come over here. We're going to pop it into my case. This is not required. This is my travel brush, so I take it with me. But we did like that. That also holds it. It's not rolling around the bathroom on the counter where I normally work. And then we're good to go. So now we're going to use, let's just clean my, actually we'll clean one of the more affordable. This is one of my budget sable brushes. We'll clean one of those. So swish it because it probably had soap in it because I store them that way. And actually I can feel a little sooty, so there we go. And you'll notice when I come over here, swish, I come to the paper towel, and I also, I guess you guys can't see very well because I'm zoomed in, but my fingers do this rocking motion, rock, right? Just kind of do, do, do. So as I'm pulling, it's just natural for me to do like this, and then I rock. So the brush, as it's coming across the paper, I rotate it like that, and that just evenly pulls moisture off and forms the tip because I'm pulling and turning. And so if you just push and pull, you might flatten it out. Not a huge deal because when you go to get paint, you can kind of form your tip, but if you get used to kind of a rolling motion or rolling rocking motion as you go, as you're drawing, you're always pulling a tip. I'm also a brush licker, so I just use a corner of my mouth to get a tip too, but some of you may find that gross, so you don't have to do that. All right, so we'll come into the, Gintastic Drunken Brush Goop. Come in, a little doggy here, remove that. Okay, so same thing. And this one's got more of a dip in it because I've used it quite a bit at work. So I'm going to use the corner. Once we've got a curve, I try and use the corners of it and use that, because if you use the middle, it'll start to get down to the bottom and you kind of leave all this extra stuff that starts to break and you end up wasting soap because you end up replacing. So I'll kind of use the corners and I'll rock into there and I'll rotate around, and then I'll evenly use areas of the puck during each session to maximize the value. As I mentioned in previous videos, if you practice good maintenance and take care of your tools, you can prolong their life. If you use your soap properly, you can prolong its life. And then the longer you prolong it, the less frequently you have to replace it, which saves you dollars in the long run, which means more dollars for your hobbies, your minis, your paints, food, hangout time, your energy drinks, your beverages, things of that nature. So anyways, in terms of cleaning, we're doing the same thing. I'm pulling into this, going with the grain, rotating as I go. The one difference between this and the other soap is I find this to be a much softer soap, might be a good word to describe it as. So when it forms, when I form my tip with it and I clean off my paintbrushes, I find, we're going to wipe that off to get a little off my hand, I find that the brushes aren't quite as stiff. It's still fine, it still holds the point, but not quite as stiff. So if that's something you're concerned with your fancier brushes, this might be a little less, I don't want to say harsh, but they do dry, or it does dry a little softer. The bristles are a little like, I could tap my hand if I push hard enough, they do end up bending. But yeah, there we go. I think during our ramble here, we formed a nice tip, got it clean, good to go. We'll come over here, same thing. Store it in our little storage apparatus, and we're good. Boom. As a recap, if you guys are interested in picking up this brush soap, this is from Monument Hobbies. Got a link and a coupon down below, and this right here is Master's Brush Soap. Now, as a slight bonus here, I also do use the same process for my dry brushes here. I should have done this before I closed it. This one isn't dirty, but I will also do the same thing. There is one difference though. So first of all, these are usually pretty grimy. There's a lot of paint in it. Paint gets into ferrule in these too because of the nature of it. As I mentioned before, using the right tool for the job. Dry brushes are expendable. They will get torn up and destroyed, but if you do maintain them and clean them as best you can prolong their uses, which means you don't have to replace them as often. So I like this cup. I like the GW or the Citadel paint cup a little bit better, but you can see down in there those ridges at the bottom. If this had paint in it, I would be down here and I'd be rocking back and forth on those ridges to really help agitate the paint. I'm rotating the brush back and forth in a circular motion with my fingers and dragging across that, because we're really trying to agitate that paint and get the paint off. You also notice here instinctively, I've cleaned these thousands of times. I instantly went here to drag the side to get moisture out and also paint, and that gives me an indication of, is there paint still coming out? Can I visually look at it? Is there paint stuck? If there's paint stuck, I come back over here, same thing, back and forth, and then with these, I'll be pretty aggressive on my hand, using that as kind of an abrasive thing to clean the brush. And you'll notice this, I'm not being as particular as the nice ones because this is going to get damaged anyway. I'm not jamming, I'm still doing the same process, but I'm not as particular. I'm not worried about it because these are going to get destroyed anyway. Come back in here, same thing. And you guys can't, maybe when I'm going too fast, you can't see it, definitely can't hear it, but I can feel it. I'm rubbing those ridges right there, just trying to agitate it. Then the big difference when you're cleaning a dry brush, I come back over here, I go to my paper towel, I dry my brush off on it, right? I'm using my other hand that doesn't really have soap on these fingers. I'll just form the tip on this one. If I'm working on something like this, I just kind of wring it out. You do not want, I repeat, you do not want paint or your soap to dry in this. It will not damage it if it dries, but with the nature of dry brushing, you want to come in, put your dry brush into wet paint as a dry brush, then you want to clean it off on your paper towel and then use it for dry brushing. If there's soap in it, I have found that it messes up the dry brushing. You get a weird powdery residue. Then you have to clean out your brush to not only clean out the soap and the paint now, but now your brush is wet and it's not as useful for dry brushing. So I do not store my dry brushes with soap in them. If you're not going to be painting with them for a very long time, you could probably store with soap and then clean them or clean the soap out at some point and then prep for a session when they're dry. You could do that, but in general, I use them so frequently that I clean them as best I can. I get as much brush soap and suds out as possible. I form them to a tip if they have a tip. If it's one of these, I just wring them out because this will hold a lot of water, and I'll just kind of pull and pinch a little bit to get water out, sometimes shake it, store it and let it dry. And that way, next time when I go to use it, this is good to go. As a final recap, again, when you're painting with a normal brush, try and prevent paint from getting to your ferrule. If it gets in, clean it out as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean deep clean, it just means swish, get it out quickly. When you're dry brushing, you will get some paint inadvertently in here. It just happens. All right, guys, so that's going to conclude our video today on brush maintenance and things to worry about with painting, and particularly not getting paint in the ferrule. It's a primary way to destroy a brush quickly. If it happens again, don't worry about it. Clean it out. Get back to painting. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any thoughts, concerns, comments, anything at all, sound off in the comments below. Have you used this brush set before to use something different? Are you in a different area of the world where they have different products? Let us know. You'd be surprised how many people are tuning into these hobby types of videos, and they're from somewhere else in the world that I'm not from, and their product availability is different. So you never know. If you're from like Germany or something and you use a different product, someone else may be tuning in, and you may name a product that will do the same thing, but is available in their country. As always, big shout out and thank you again to Robert for sponsoring these videos. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and as always, keep painting those models, keep rolling those dice, and I will catch you guys next time.